Let's call the meeting to order, and someone taking roll, I assume?
I have the roll call. All are present with the exception of Sandy Pop, who's been excused.
All right. So first item on the agenda, on item C, or item approval of the agenda, is there a motion to approve the agenda for the 17th of September 2020 meeting of the Green Bay Housing Authority?
Motion to approve.
So motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any additions or corrections? No last minute additions? In that case, all in favor, are we voting by civic clerk or just by voice?
You can use a voice vote.
All right, so all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item is approval of the minutes from the July 16th, 2020 meeting of the Green Bay Housing Authority. I'll make a motion to approve those minutes. Is there a second?
I second that.
All right, very good. We have a second. Are there any additions or corrections to that before we move to discuss or vote on it? Any additions or corrections? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as presented in your packet, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. Very good. Moving on then to item E, regular business. First item is consideration with possible action regarding the review of redevelopment options presented by representatives of Baker Tilly. And we have those representatives available this morning. So I would first entertain a motion to open the floor so that they can speak. Do we have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right, and I will second. So a motion and a second to open the floor. So floor, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing nothing, motion carries. The floor is yours.
Very good.
I would just start by saying that we've been working with Baker Tilly on various proposals, remember, for Mason Manor, right? We have some significant improvements we need to make there, so we've asked them to come up with some recommendations on how the best way for us to do that with regards to financing. So you guys received the 2 info sheets? Yep. From them, correct? Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Very, very good. Thank you all for your time today. And really what I want to do is kind of give you an update, kind of more of a big picture. And we're going to start with kind of a picture with the different green, yellow, and red, kind of highlights on the sheets, and really kind of going over, what have we seen so far and kind of the numbers and analysis of looking at the repositioning of Mason Manor, and what are maybe some key factors that you as board members, should be thinking about as you kind of consider, the next steps. So with that, I'm going to maybe turn over to Caitlin to kind of start through that sheet with the different color codes to look at some of our early observations.
Thanks, Don, and thanks guys for having us today. Maybe even before I get into the specifics of the sheet, I might just talk kind of generally. As Cheryl noted, we've been looking at different options as the best way to do a significant amount of rehab on Mason Manor. And maybe the first thing that I'll say that we found is that it seems that a RAD conversion is probably the better, more stable platform to try and get a significant amount of rehab done. And the reason for that is because you guys can take on debt, and with how the funding system is through HUD, converting to a Section 8 platform is just more stable. You can get OCAP adjustments every year. And HUD has been really trying to come up with some more flexible options through RAD conversions. So we feel that path is probably better than a mixed finance application. And so with that, I know that you guys had engaged an entity to provide your capital needs assessment, which has come back at around $75,000 per unit. And I know that you had Gorman and Company come and walk your site and review that capital needs assessment along with your wish list. And they came up with about $92,000 per unit in required rehab as well as desired rehab. And so really with that, and to try and accomplish that significant amount of rehab, we feel that low-income housing tax credits is the best path to accomplish that. And so, just quick, background on that, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, WHEDA, is the allocator of those tax credits. And those applications are due on December 11th. And what it is, for those who might not be familiar, basically the tax credit reduces an entity's federal income tax liability. So an investor will pay for the credit and provide equity to your project. And this can be significant. So, there's two different types of tax credits, a 9% and a 4%. Both are competitive in how, we're going to choose to apply. But with the 9%, you're going to receive more equity. So as I mentioned, it is a very competitive process. You're competing with other, developers in the state of Wisconsin and several other locations. So it kind of comes down to how our project will score. And what WHEDA looks at, some high-level scoring things that they look at are, where is your project located? Is it near amenities? Is it in a QCT? And then they also look to the experience of the applicant. Have you done other LIHTC projects before that you've been successful in? And so with that, we think that you probably will need to partner with another developer who can help submit the application along with you guys. And so with having a partner, right, that means that there's a little bit of give and take. So a developer partner is going to want a percentage of the developer fee that you can earn under the tax credit program. That's something that you can negotiate with them. But they might not necessarily want to be involved in the ownership of the project. You might be able to negotiate that, they're more of a turnkey developer where they come in and help you do the rehab and then they're out. And that can vary then in terms of the developer fee split. So with ownership, if you can negotiate with that developer that they're not involved, you would still have to share ownership with your tax credit investor. And so how that's structured is that there's one entity that will own the site, and the investor, since they're putting in a ton of money, are going to own 99.99%. And then the general partner is going to own the remaining 0.01%, of which, the nonprofit that you guys set up for your scattered sites could own 100% of that GP entity. And the tax credit investor, they're not interested in the day-to-day activities of your building. They don't want to manage multifamily housing. They want the tax credit. So they're really just investing their money for the tax credit. So really all the management decisions and everything is going to be left to you guys. And then at the end of the 15-year compliance period, your tax credit investor, they've got their benefit. They want out, so they can offer to sell you the building for $1. So while, for the first 15 years you are sharing ownership, you guys are really in control, have the ability to, buy it at the end of the compliance period. Yes, go ahead, Cheryl.
So can that tax investor change within the 15 years?
You've got you've got a partnership agreement and all the terms and so forth you've agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, that investor could sell their interest to another investor during these 15 years, but the rules or the partnership agreement can't change because that's what you entered into. You kind of abide by those rules. Then also, as Caitlin noted, the ability for you to buy, essentially take the property back after these 15 years is a code, it's a statutory code, it's section 42, it's a revenue code, so that can't be changed either. That has been around since 1986.
Okay. Thank you.
And yeah, please feel free to interrupt me with any questions at any time. So then, you know, in terms of your tenants, those that are already living in Mason Manor, you know, for them under the RAD program, they won't really see a change. You know, their rent is still going to be 30% of their income. They're still going to have to qualify, all of those types of things. But with RAD, it allows for some different options. And they've come up with how to come up with a few different blends, I'll call them. So one of them is that with your RAD conversion, you could convert your units, 75% of them as RAD units, and the remaining 25% under the Section 18 program. This would all be done under one transaction. You would not have to submit a separate Section 18 application, rather just the RAD application. But what it does is those 25% of the units can receive tenant protection vouchers that can then be project-based into the project. So it allows for us to charge potentially up to 110% fair market rent, or up to 120% depending on which half of RAD we take. But the drawback is that that contract would be separate from the RAD contract, those RAD units, and it would have to be managed by an entity that has authority to manage vouchers. And then similarly,
so when you say that, you mean that they would run through ICS? 25% of the units would be managed by whoever administers the Section 8 program?
correct.
Okay.
Yep. So you would have to share some responsibility with them. You guys could still manage the RAD half contract, but they would have to manage the TBB half contract.
So what does that mean? I mean, what does that actually mean with regards like the annual inspections? It would be the same rules that ICS would have for landlords? Is that what
It'll depend on what avenue of a RAD conversion we choose to convert under, whether that's PBB or PBRA. But I think they've been trying to not really, I guess, complicate things.
Mm-hmm.
So I can double check to confirm, but I would think that they would try and keep things, you know, I would try and keep management of it as simple as possible and try and do the same types of inspections.
Okay.
I'm gonna note that though. And we've kind of been hearing from HUD that, you know, while all of their stated documentation says the 75-25 split, they've been kind of being a little bit lenient if someone wants like a 65-35. And again, like the benefit of doing that while, you know, you are having to get someone else to manage that contract is that we can get more rent, which means we get more higher rent, which means we get more income, which means we can take on more debt, which means we can do more rehab. And then the other type of blend that HUD has is the closeout blend. So if you are a small housing authority of 50 units or less, or you have one remaining asset, you can utilize this blend where, you know, you would convert as many units as you needed to under RAD such that 50 are left, and those would convert under Section 18 and get the tenant protection vouchers. So it would be the same thing, you know, where you have to split management of that contract. It's just another mechanism because HUD has said that the 75-25 blend can only be used on a 4% transaction, whereas the closeout blend could be used on a 9% or a 4%. Okay.
And on that closeout blend, we're converting 150 units with RAD and then 50 with Section 18?
So this would assume that your scattered site project would already have gone through the Section 18 program and be out, such that you're only left with Mason Manor. And then your 152, 54 units there, you know, 50 would be tenant protection vouchers, the rest would be RAD.
Okay. And then, but that in that model though, like we don't have to deal with ICS in any management where you could strictly be us then.
No, you would have to deal with ICS because it's the same where you're getting tenant protection vouchers and it's a voucher system So it would still have to be managed by someone who has that authority. So either of the blends means you'd have to bring them in. If you did 100% of your units as a RAD conversion, you wouldn't have to bring anyone else in. Okay.
Can you repeat the last thing you just said?
Yeah.
Caitlin, you're cutting out.
I'm sorry, yes. So either blend scenario, you would have to bring in another partner because either of the blends have the tenant protection vouchers, which get project-based,
Okay.
which have to be managed by a vouchering authority.
Gotcha.
If you converted all of your units at Mason Manor under the RAD program, then it would just be you guys.
Okay.
And I should clarify, as a RAD unit, all of this is under the RAD program, but converting them as a RAD unit, which means we are limited by the RAD rent.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, thank you. For sure. So before I start talking about the risk reward sheet, any other questions? Because I know I threw a ton of information at you guys right now.
So, I guess to clarify, our wish list, when we went through with staff, so the board understands this, the wish list included, we kind of looked at Wausau as the model. So the wish list was actually all of the things we needed for the base, all of our utility work, generators, elevator space, and then some unit remodels. And then it also included things like, I think in Wausau they had a separate little grocery area. They had a place, I think, for movies. They had some of that auxiliary thing. So we know that depending on how we want to finance this, that we can cut that wish list down and still have a very good product with improved units and improved common areas and that type of stuff. So I just wanted to clarify that when you see wish list, that's an all-encompassing number compared to what we could have.
That's great clarification. Okay, so with that, we then kind of looked at 6 different scenarios. So there's one set of 3 that are all the 9% tax credit option. So again, really super powerful. We're getting a lot of equity because it's a higher percentage credit. And with that, as Cheryl described, one of the options is the wish list, so the $92,000 a unit. And then the second option is, what reduction of rehab from the wish list would it take to get a deal to work? And options 1 and 2 are both with that 50 closeout blend that I talked about. And then option 3 is with the 9% reduced rehab, but what if you guys didn't want to give up any control on managing your units and just do a straight RAD conversion? So that's what the first 3 options on that chart are. And, the color scheme of red, yellow, and green are kind of what we perceived as risk reward. But, these colors can change based on what you guys perceive as kind of risk reward. And so each option goes through the same categories: competition with the tax credit program, ownership, how it's structured, how the RAD conversion will work, whether the project or not is feasible financially, how much developer fee could you earn and how much would you have to give up, and then what level of rehab can you accomplish. So in looking at option 1 as a 9%, I talked a little bit before about scoring. It is very competitive. So for us, that's a perceived higher risk because we might submit a tax credit application and potentially we don't score high enough compared to the other applications that were submitted that year, and all of the credit was taken up by a higher scoring application. So it's risky in that we might not win and might have to wait another year before we could reapply. Next item is ownership, and I kind of talked about with tax credit. You would have to share ownership with the tax credit investor, but like I mentioned, all the decisions really are being made by you guys, and you'll be able to buy it back at the end of the 15-year. So it's more like a moderate risk. Then RAD This is a blend, so you are gonna have to have another entity manage that, voucher contract. So it's less moderate risk because you are giving up some control, but there's also some benefit in that you're getting higher rent by doing that. In this option one, you know, with the wish list option of $92,000 a unit, it's really hard to make this deal work because the 90% credits are capped. So at some point, you know, we have all these costs, but we can only receive 1.4 million of credit. So with 92,000 a unit, you know, we're more eligible for like $2 million of credit. So we're leaving a lot of credit on the table, which means that there's a significant gap of $3 million. So if we really wanted to try and get that wish list accomplished, we'd have to find other sources of funds besides just tax credit equity. Then, because we're going for tax credits and you are partnering with a developer to help you be more competitive and help you manage this rehab process, you are going to have to share some developer fee with them. And depending on whether or not they have any ownership stake in that GP entity, you might have to share some cash flow back with them as well. And then rehab level, this option is looking at the 92,000 a unit. So that's kind of just like in general categories and then how things shook out with this first option. Any questions so far?
So bottom line, if we want to go with this option, and we need to come up with about $3.5 million of other funding.
Correct.
That might be a lot of money. Okay.
A lot of money.
What
then-
did Wausau do?
What did they do?
Yep. Did Wausau pursue one of these blended options, or is that a totally different thing?
So my, go ahead, Don.
Our understanding is they actually had, you know, quite a bit of, for whatever reason, quite a bit of reserves. And so they actually closed on the deal under mixed finance because they couldn't get any debt, but they had quite a few reserve dollars on hand, like several $1 million to use for the rehab. And then they converted to RAD kind of post tax credit, again, for kind of stable, you know, income and so forth. So it was a little bit different scenario with their big reserves.
I'm not sure when they submitted their mixed finance application, when they did that transaction, because the blend concept is a newer concept for HUD.
That's right, that's right.
So it might not have been an option to them when they did their tax credit application.
That's right.
They had quite a bit of money in the bank, Steve.
Yeah, no,
I think that's how they came up with their gap.
I also see 6 options on the spreadsheet, and none of them pursue anything that isn't a shared ownership with the developer deal, right?
Correct, and it mostly is because WEDA does give a significant amount of points to experience. So if we were submitting the tax credit application with just your nonprofit entity, we would for sure get 2 points. We might get 3 points out of 12. So someone a developer who's done a lot of tax credit deals probably could score more like an 8 or a 9, and help, get more points, which makes us more competitive. But yeah, go ahead.
All of this feels like it's building to like a line in the sand that is crossed. We head down this road, and then they tell us no because of points or somebody else's project is cooler or whatever. Maybe that's a bad word. What happens then? Like if the world comes to a screeching halt and it doesn't work out, can we just go about business as usual, or are we entered into an agreement that now we can't get out of and is more risky for nothing?
Well, yeah, typically any agreements or any of these financing options are purely contingent, will be solely contingent upon getting local housing tax credits. So really, if you do not win, for like you said, for any of the reasons, everything is null and void, and you're kind of like you are today. No agreements are in place.
Okay, so is that weighed in the options that's in front of us, or is that like the red, green, and yellow are assuming any one of them go ahead? Right, so what risk are you actually trying to outline for me with these color codings, which I super appreciate because I'm understanding this.
I think right now it's perceived risk of moving forward with a tax credit application, right? Because like that's really the next step, to move forward with a RAD application is to move forward with a RAD conversion is to do a RAD application. And we would need a RAD application and the result of that application, a CHAP, in order to submit a tax credit application. So really like this perceived risk is, do you want to take the risk of submitting an application with the knowledge that it may or may not score well enough to win this year?
Yeah, so let me slow that down then. What's our actual risk?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess the risk as you move forward is there will be some, out of pocket, dollars spent. There are, I know you've already done the capital needs study, and it may have to be updated a little bit depending on timing. Market study, appraisal, application fee, some other costs. I mean, it could be $25,000, $30,000 to submit the application. That would be a sunk cost if you did move ahead or were awarded.
Okay, so I mean, this is a 1 comma. This is a 1 comma number that we're talking about as the risk, and that's a one common number. Option 1 or option 6.
Yeah, they're all the same. Yeah, if they're out of pocket, really.
Okay.
And I guess, Steve, when I think about this, so, to get this kind of money, we need to do some type of a low-income housing tax credit. But what if we don't get it? I mean, that's a good question. So what do we do with Mason Manor if we don't get these tax credits? Well, I think we decide, are we going to wait another year to apply again for tax credits and then try to post like we've been doing, fixing things? Because I'm not sure, I don't know any other options we would have in order to do that level of rehab. I don't think we've got the value in the property to substantiate taking a loan out on it, for example, to make those payments to make that kind of remodel.
Right.
So I feel like tax credits are probably our only way to get this level of remodel done, unless somebody wealthy dies and wants to make a donation to the Green Bay Housing Authority. Tax exempt, but right.
Right.
So I think it's a matter of which tax credits we want to apply for and how to go about it.
Understood. So my follow-up question to that is, if we are not selected or it doesn't get approved this year, or however that's supposed to be phrased, what of that initial investment can we reuse next year, or do we have to cough up that whole new 1 common number for an investment?
Most would have to be, it doesn't have to be the full amount. Most reports, like WIDA, will on within, I think, even 6 months. So obviously, so it'd be the full 12 months away, so they'd all have to be updated, but the updated cost should not be the amount of the full cost, right, since they have all the base information, so it'll be a little less.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
Good
So,
question. Good question.
yeah, those are great questions.
Okay. I'm going to go back on mute and just knock yourself out. Thank you.
So, option 2, similar, 9%, it's got the blend, but what would it take, to make this deal work so we don't have that $3 million gap? What level of rehab? So, really, it drops down to around about $66,000 per unit, which I put in red because it's under the capital needs assessment amount of $75,000 a unit, which is what your provider told you was an essential, or the combination of like all the essential things that needed to be fixed. So while this project is feasible and would work with 9% credits without having to find $3 million, we would have to then go back to our capital needs provider to see, hey, like, you know, are there a few things where we can make some tweaks that maybe they don't need to be done in year 1, but could be done in year 10 or 15, such that our rehab amount is more in line with this 66,000 versus the 75,000. And then similarly, we want to go back to Foreman, who put that cost estimate together for you and say, okay, from our whole wish list, what things would we have to take out and still try and meet everything that's essential? Could we get to the 66,000 number? And based on our conversation last Friday, I did reach out to Gorman, and they are taking a look. So once we hear back from them, we'll kind of have an updated list of how we could maybe accomplish a $66,000 number. Go ahead, Steven.
Thank you. So, I mean, and that's the lion's share of what we're looking at with these options, right? Is dialing in that wish list relative to what it actually costs and what threshold it gives us. So, so the risk marginally changes, judging by these color codings.
Mm-hmm.
But without knowing how much we actually need to spend or want to spend, we don't go much further than this, right? I mean.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think you do need that information from Gorman to confirm that at 66,000 you could get the big ticket items, the boilers, or, you know, the things that you have to have done.
Yeah,
and then the wish list is just,
You said something like that $75,000 threshold that your lender suggested was your threshold, right? That's what we need to confirm. I mean, that's like there's.
So you're. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl.
That was our capital needs assessment we had done.
Yep.
Which was not the wish list. I think it was the capital needs of kind of the things we just need to get done to bring the code to meet the standards for HUD. They estimated about 75.
Okay.
And you probably know a lot of people, these numbers are moving all the time, depending on whatnot, but.
Spend it, now's a good time to do it, because it's all outrageous. So, and then I'm probably out of order here or interrupting your presentation, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're totally fine.
The wish list that has some amenities that are above and beyond just the housing piece, the community spaces, or something sounded like a programmatic version of amenities, grocery store or grab and go or whatever that. Are we sure that we can still ensure that sort of, like, do we invoke some other difficulty as it's not really housing? By added amenities. Does the question make sense?
I think it does, Steve, and I think I got to save some time. We're not going to get a wish list out of a project we have here with our options that we have. Unfortunately, I think if we had more capital reserves, if we had a couple million in capital reserves, we might be able to get a few more of those amenities. But that being said, we just rehabbed our kitchen. So we have a relatively new kitchen in the unit, but the grand area in Mason Manor could be remodeled significantly with some other things. So even though it's not a wish list, I think the improvements that we would make would be significant to the tenants and make improvements to the units. Is that, guys, am I right with that? Jamie and Caitlin?
So it's not worth investing a ton of attention on right now. That's fine. Like, I get it. That's fair.
Well, you know, and I would say too that, like, you know, as Cheryl said, if someone dies and gives you guys a lot of money, like, or if we come into other sources of funds, you know, we could look at adding some things back in from the wish list in the future. But this is what, you know, a 9% deal right now with the blend assumptions, what we looked at for your operating expenses, things like that we could take on, that's where we're at.
Okay.
Cool. So then, option 3, still a 9%, but we've eliminated the blend. and we are just gonna convert all 152, 154 units as RAD. So again, our rents are much lower. And so I really, wanted to illustrate that, like, with this option, we can only do about 38,000 of rehab a unit. So significantly less, which is why that blend of getting like those extra rents is so, beneficial, which I know you do have to give up some control. But it really does allow you to take on more debt, which allows you to get more rehab done. So, and from my perspective, this is not a great option because I'm not confident that 38,000 a unit would even hit some of those really major components that you guys need to do in this building.
I would agree with that. I would say that really isn't worth the money standing in the app for, if we're looking at 37,000 a unit, so.
Right.
So we ran all of the same scenarios under the 4% credit. And WIDA also has a state credit that gets coupled with the 4% credit. So it's maybe like 7 or 8%. So it's not quite as powerful as the 9, but still much better than just solely a 4. So again, the first option would be a 4% with state credit application with a blend. And we did the 65-35 blend. And again, I put it in here to see what your wish list would be. And so it's a little better than in the 9% scenario. You still have a $2 million gap though. So we have to find a significant level of money to accomplish all of the rehab you desire. Option 5 or option 2 in this set of options would still be the 4% credit with the blend, but what would we have to reduce our rehab to get this to work? And that would be about 73,000 a unit. So a little bit less than the 9% and still lower than your capital needs assessment. And then again, the last one for comparison, 4% with state credit, but now you're going to do all of your units as a RAD conversion. Lower rents means we can only do like 26,000 a unit in rehab.
Caitlin, just to clarify on that option number 5, it says the rehab level is 52.7 per unit, not 70. That's correct. It's 52.
It is 52. Okay. Sorry, I think I must go. It is 52,776. So still under the capital needs assessment, and we also shared that number with Gorman again, just to see, with what their cost estimate was, where we would fall with the rehab.
So kind of one way with Kim said, what they come back with, right, if they say, 52,000 is just too low, then that really will kind of take out this 4% options, 4, 5, and 6 will be off the table because option 4, 92,000, we know we can't get there. 5 is 52,000, 53,000. So we'll kind of see if that's enough or is that too thin.
So I'm kind of seeing that really the two, and I apologize. Apparently they need to cut trees down behind me today. Right behind me, somebody was talking. It looks like the options we should be considering are 2 and 5, maybe 5 depending on what that number comes in. Really?
I would agree.
I mean, one of the things we talked about, which, I guess would make me very sad, is eliminating our curlicue drive on the front of the building. So it's just that our drive is awkward now. You know how when you enter Mason Manor, you're actually coming in off of Admiral Court. And it's a round drive, so our entrance is like on the 2nd floor, not the 1st, and you've got the underground, and it's just awkward. It's awkward storage space, it's awkward use to enter and exit, and we would love to remove that. But I bet that's a big cost. So maybe, when we talk with Gorman, we talk with Ted, we can be like, well, what does this cost compared to, I'd rather keep that and be annoyed by it and put more money into units. That would make it better for tenants, I guess, is what I'm thinking, but.
I'm
looking forward to it.
So, I understand how we're eliminating 3 and 6, right? Because the dollar amount in that last cell seems like it's crummy, and Cheryl Erninger knows at it. So I agree. That's how fundamentally I understand this. I'm struggling to understand why option 1 or option 4 would essentially be off the table though, because we'd have so much trouble spending $92,000, or because we don't have a $2 or $3 million nest egg laying around.
Yeah, the latter.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if we are then 2 or 5, which is I think what that means, what's the difference? 15 grand per unit? But
Yeah,
it's about the same, and, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and there is a, for essentially this maybe $2,000 difference with a different application, you can essentially submit both applications. You kind of have two, right, they're both competitive. You know, and again, as Caitlin said, we don't, you know, who else is applying, we're applying against the whole state, so it may make sense to actually apply. The only kind of goofy thing, let's say somehow you were awarded both, we would make you take the 4% option because it's a little less competitive, still competitive, but a little less competitive, so we would make you take the 4%. So it's kind of like, so not a perfect situation.
I don't understand that.
So let's say you apply, like you said, 2 and 5 we have on the table, you can apply December 11th in both applications.
Yep.
And let's say by good fortune, whatever, we just said, hey, Green Bay Housing Authority, you won both.
Yeah,
because you won
both.
both.
That means we get 13%, right? Is that?
That would be the best thing. If you somehow, in the scoring, you win both, they're gonna say, Green Bay Housing, you have to take the 4% award, you don't have a choice, we're not gonna allow you to take the 9. It's just their prerogative, the 9% is a little more competitive, both are competitive, but 4% probably a tad bit less competitive than if you're gonna take this, because it works. Otherwise you would apply under this scenario.
Okay, so I love a little competition. Do we have any sense as to who we are up against?
Well, that's kind of what we're doing right now. You know, we're tied into what's going on in the state. Probably in a week or two, we'll have a little bit, you know, the December 11th thing, people are determining who can apply, but, you know, it's the length. So this is what, at least on the 9% side, this is, you'd be submitting in the different categories. We're not competing against people doing new construction. You're competing against people who are doing preservation of existing subsidized housing. So if you're competing against other housing authorities, for example, you're competing potentially if like Milwaukee submits something, you would potentially be competing against Milwaukee. You're competing against owners of Section 8 properties out there, competing against people that have rural development, subsidized housing, so that kind of type of housing.
Yeah, but Don, who's got the list of who's submitting on December 11th? That's all we.
Yeah,
It's like a magic question.
unfortunately, no one knows until December 11th, the full complete list. Yeah, we hear things, we definitely hear things, we see things, we hear things, but unfortunately it's not that one list, and that's why it's a little bit of a shake of the dice, a little bit. I mean,
Don't we get like more points because we're a public housing authority though, comparatively speaking? We haven't been awarded. I mean, Milwaukee's gotten some bank off these tax credits in the past. We have not. I mean, I think there's I don't know. Maybe I'm a glass half full kind of
No way, Cheryl, it's our turn. I'm like, it's our turn.
You know, what we probably can do, and if it's a few weeks or whatever, is, you know, Keelan's been again working through the scoring, and I think this is a good first overview. Maybe another meeting could be diving into the scoring categories, so you can kind of see where you do well, where we might not score as high as other deals. That might be another call.
Yes. And I will add too, to go back to your question, Stephen, as Don was saying, under a 9%, you're competing against those other preservation type projects. Under a 4%, they only, it's more of a general category, so then we would be competing against new construction or any other type of project. They don't have a preservation category under the 4%.
Okay, I mean, okay. We need to dial in our total cost that has to be spent.
Yeah.
We need to have an understanding of our wish list and how much of it can be met, if any at all. We need to find a partner and to see what that partner would be willing to participate in. And all of that needs to happen in conjunction with the application for the 11th of December on what I'm hearing is either option 5 or option 2, but not both. Right? Is that
Could be both,
could be
but
both?
yeah. But yeah,
The people,
I like winning stuff a lot. Bill, I'm not sure where you're at on this, but winning is really important to me.
is that a Green Bay thing or what?
No one. Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, before I knew it was a competition, I was less interested. Now I'm like, bring it.
So am I to read you by saying you prefer to just apply for one instead of to get both of them and have to take the lower?
I'm not sure I understand why we necessarily would need one or the other, until we know how much we actually need to spend, right?
Well, and I think that's definitely the next step is to get that number. And we actually do kind of have a partner now with Gorman. They've been working with us along. So, I mean, I think that we can walk through. I mean, I think to myself, Steve, even if we don't have a place to pick up your groceries, for example, if we can convert those libraries on each floor into actually like usable laundry spaces or more functional things for tenants, that would be a really good thing.
Sure.
So I'm not, our wish list was comprehensive. So I'm thinking that I think there's some good things that can be done. And really, if you think about just not having water leaking into our units, I mean, even some of the basic stuff would be good to have all those remodeled, repaired.
That shouldn't be wish list. That shouldn't be wish list.
That's not wish list, but that's the need list, right?
Yeah.
But even upgrade to units themselves with the flooring, cabinets, closet doors, some functionality in the bathrooms to make them more easily to get around in. Those things are important too, and would make a big difference if you live in there. Even if you don't get to grab and go, or you have to do this, if you have to keep that circular drive. It's fine.
It looks cool on Google Maps, so.
It does. It does look cool on Google Maps, that's true. So at this point, I guess my question is, do we want like a special meeting in a couple of weeks when we get the number back? To do any action that we want to do, because I see on the agenda, we put consideration with possible action. Regardless of whatever we do we have to apply for RAD and get that CHAD?
the
For either one, for any option we choose on that?
Yeah, so
Sorry, the CHAD.
WIDA requires, to allow an application such as yours with the housing authority to show debt, that you have that CHAP in hand to say, hey, I'm gonna go RAD, so I can take on debt. And so really in the past, or, most recently, HUD has probably been taking 45 to 60 days to review RAD applications and issue CHAP. I think if we, when we submit our RAD application, if we go that path, we put in there, hey, we're trying to submit an application December 11th, could you kind of expedite this review? And then also talk to some of the people, in the field office for them to kind of talk to the RAD folks to say, hey, we'd really appreciate an expedited look at this since we're trying to meet this deadline.
So it's my understanding too that we can apply for that CHAP and not use it?
Correct.
Once you apply for it?
Yeah.
I guess maybe I'd ask the board if we could maybe have the ability to apply for the RAD and the CHAP to get that moving, knowing that we may not use it, depending on how this comes down.
They take
That's
all,
a possibility.
they take all 60 days if that's in their window. I think we have no choice but to go after it now. Right? Steve math, that's coming up pretty quick on December 11th.
Mhm.
It is.
I don't have any objection to that. Anybody else? Bill, what does that sound like? Do we need a motion for such things?
We need to do that today? Or are you thinking of that for a future meeting?
I guess I would like to be able to move forward with at least the HUD RAD CHAP application, knowing that we don't have to follow through on it if we choose not to as a board, but at least we can get it going then and get it into HUD's hands for that time.
All right, so that leaves us with a possible
And then-
meeting.
Don't say that, I already screwed that word up once.
It's an election year, Bill, it's not even funny.
I know, I'm struggling with it. All right,
So, I think I just heard that, I would like to make a motion for submitting a app.
before we do that, are there any other questions? Because we still have the floor open, so we have to close the floor first. Okay, any other questions? Caitlin? No?
I mean, I threw in that, longer, like, summary sheet that goes through, like, the financials of each option, but I wasn't really gonna get into detail unless you guys wanted me to, but it more just kind of shows, like, what we were looking at as, like, sources and uses. And then again, like, the bottom line rehab number, and then it also shows the amount of developer fee that can be earned in each option. So, feel free to look at that, and, if you have questions, you can certainly reach out. But that's what that other document is.
Well, and I guess, with board members, when we were working with Baker Tilly, we have I think we've got a little over $800,000 in reserves right now. So we had them look at scenarios using $500,000 of that to plug the gaps. So we really don't have capacity for any more money to put into this project other than that, just so you know. Comparatively speaking to other, like Wausau, for example, they have a lot more money. We only have about $500,000 that could go towards this project, so. FYI.
So, last call, any questions for Caitlin or Don? Hearing none, I will make a motion to close the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Otherwise, all in favor of closing the floor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Any opposed? Hearing none, the floor is closed. Caitlin and Don, thank you for everything. Most of it went right over my head, but I'll figure it out at some point. So, all right. Steve, you wanted to make that motion?
Yeah, honestly though, I need to know what it stands for. Is it CHAP? Is it CHAD? What are those actual words?
CHAP, a Commitment of Housing Authority Payment.
Oh man,
So-
I want to make a motion for a CHAP submittal application. Thank you, JB.
Probably I would think the motion that you're looking at, Steve, would be to authorize staff to apply with HUD for the RAD, under the RAD program to receive the CHAP.
Absolutely, Cheryl. That's thank you. I love you guys.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries, so Cheryl, you can proceed with that application.
Alrighty, and then I think we'll probably need another meeting within the next maybe couple of weeks. Maybe early October if possible, when we get those numbers back on the cost numbers, and then really to take a serious look at how we want to proceed forward. So we'll do a poll, we'll poll you guys. I know Bill's out of town, right through the 18th, but we'll set that up with you guys for very early October.
Okay. All right. Anything further in regard to item number E1, this consideration in the presentation? So any further questions? Looks like we're done with that. So Caitlin and Don, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess you guys are free to step out if you want.
Okay, Cheryl will be in touch soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to item 2, consideration and possible action regarding a request for approval to fill the upcoming clerk 3 position with a resident services coordinator. So,
All right. So I don't need to read the entire agenda item for you, but Karen Kramer put in her retirement papers, so she's going to be leaving us January 8th. After going through all the job duties and all our big projects on the table between Section 18, RAD, income housing tax credits, we thought it would be most beneficial for all of us to hire a resident services coordinator, which is Kaving's current position, so have 2 of those. All the current job duties between work orders, entering rent payments would still be fulfilled because all 3 of us do that in-house right now, but it's just looking at those higher level duties. We're having a significant more lease up, a lot more people on our waiting list. If we do go Section 18 or RAD, our buildings are going to be more favorable, and we see that we're going to get a lot more applicants on our waiting list. So we're just looking at rehiring that position with a different position. And just since our budget year is July 1st, there's going to be a $6,000 to $8,000 difference from our budget to have hopefully a month of overhire that we can use from our reserves. But then going forward, January 1st of 2021, once we get Section 18, we're going to be generating a lot more money in rent. And then with the RAD conversion, we could possibly also be generating a lot more money in rent. Because right now we can only charge 80% of the fair market value of rent, but depending on which avenue we go, Section 18 alone, we can charge 100 to 110% of the fair market value rent. So we see that we're going to be able to compensate it. We won't have to touch our reserve starting with our July 1st, 2021 budget, but we'll just need to touch our reserve for this current budget year up until June 30th.
So the clerk type 3 position has been there for a very, very long time. And of course, technology is changing things all the time. We don't have our traditional, and I speak as an old timer, an old City Hall employee timer, where people, take a letter, do a lot of typing, send those things out. A lot of those duties are changing. In fact, I think Karen's probably doing a number of those things now in the job she's in. So we're just finding that people that we're working with, our tenants, are having a few more challenges. We're getting a lot more tenants that are coming out of the shelter that need more assistance. We want to do more outreach to our tenants, more education with them on, for our scattered sites example, there are families that don't understand how a house works. Like, we'd like to be able to work with them more to say, here's a thermostat, here's how you change a filter, all those types of things, which we don't have time to do now. So I think this position will actually be beneficial to us in being able to help our tenants more, just with life skills and those types of things, on top of entering all the things, screening tenants, lease management, all that other fun stuff. So
Updating our ACOP annually,
So let me ask this. So we're looking for a position that's comparable with what CA is doing.
it's the exact same position that CA has. CA is currently a resident services coordinator.
Yes, understand that. So with moving that position to the level that CA is at, does that leave a gap in the level that we're eliminating? So and my concern is by now having essentially 2 CAs, are we making more work for those 2 because we've eliminated a position below them that was doing something that they weren't doing?
I would say no, because CA does everything that Karen does, and then does additional, CA enters rent, CA enters, can create work orders, but Karen does say 75% of that, so if we can even it out, and then that person can help CA on those higher level things that she assists with as well,
Okay.
and myself.
Well, my concern is, I understand the need for having someone at the same level as CA, but I don't want to, by doing that, create more work for them, because now they're both doing something, but there's, the person that's retiring is doing something that maybe not getting done now. And it sounds like maybe that's not the case. But I just want to make sure that we're not creating more work for CA and her other component to this, the new hire, because we've left a gap by eliminating a position below them.
So the
So,
question is really, are there clerk,
like, if I'm doing something and, I have a secretary doing something else, if I eliminate my secretary, now I'm doing some of the things my secretary used to do.
Right.
If I gotta get them done. And I understand the need that there's gonna be more people that Todd and this other person have to deal with, but I don't want to dump more work on them that somebody else was doing before. If that makes sense.
right, it's like, what's happening to the clerk type of 3 duties that won't be there anymore? And I guess what we're saying too is that a lot of those duties can be done by both of those positions now. So if you take the clerk typist 3 out of the mix and you have a resident service coordinator, they'll probably, depending how they manage their time, the things that Karen was doing will be split between these 2 positions. Because Karen was actually doing resident service coordinator work, some of it, right? In the position she's in now is a 3, compared to the other way it was when it was created, for example.
Okay.
Am I correct with that, Jamie?
Yeah.
Jamie, your sales pitch is a little bit driven by the possibility of this Section 18 and the
Oh, you cut out. I didn't hear you. Sorry.
a little bit of your sales pitch is driven by the Section 18 and the possibility or probability of us improving Mason Manor and definitely improving your waiting list. None of that's going to happen in the time frame that you're describing, though, right? I mean, like, so say we get that 9% deal and we start to spend $93,000 per unit. I mean, that construction's not going to be in and completed until at least 2022. Do you need this immediately? And then my part 2 question of that is, Stephanie, can we afford it? Right? I mean, those you know, do you need a position filled because somebody's retiring? Yes. That seems to make sense.
Yeah.
You want to change that position to something that's not a 20th century typist, but something more like a 21st century coordinator, fine. Can we afford it? And do we need it immediately, or can we wait till we have the need? Those are my 2 questions.
So I can tell you that the Section 18 we're referring to is for our scattered sites. That's underway right now. So I'm hoping that's completed by the end of the year. That's separate than what we're talking about.
Okay.
So we talked with Stephanie with regards to the funding. You know, we have some unrestricted dollars that we can use. We'd like to use the money that's going to come in off the Section 18, but we do have the unrestricted dollars that can make up that difference. I don't want to hire a clerk 3 and then a year from now go, man, I wish we would have hired this position up, because once you hire somebody, they're in the position until they're gone. So that's kind of like where we're at this for right now with trying to get it in now. So.
Okay. So one more stupid question. These duties have been previously done by a clerk 3, and you want to hire a coordinator to replace those duties. Which one's cheaper, and why wouldn't we just insist on those responsibilities being done by a clerk 3? And that's a theoretical question.
No, that's actually an HR question. So there are duties for clerk typist 3, which would be considered a lower level, and I say that just for cost purposes. If we increase the duties of a clerk typist 3 to include the resident services coordinator, you're required to pay them a higher salary. So you're basically just creating a resident services coordinator position, calling it a clerk typist 3.
No difference. There's no net change. Okay.
Right, it's by duty, really.
Yeah. So, Stephanie, can we afford it?
Well, we have some reserves that we can use, and we're also looking at, it's only a difference between the 6,000 and 8,000, and that's for 6 months. So it's not a ton, and you never know when I budget. You know, I don't know, the 6,000 to 8,000. When I budget for certain types of benefits. If this person is a single person and they don't have it might not be as much. But worst case scenario, we're looking at 6,000 to 8,000, which we can pull from our reserves for right now. And I'm just thinking that maybe the person, it won't be that, but that was a worst case scenario.
Okay. That's a different perspective then, yeah, right? 6 to 8 grand worst case. Yeah, okay, I like that, that answers all my questions.
Or you're looking for a motion to approve? All right,
I'll make the motion. I'll second that motion.
all right, we have a motion and a second to approve the filling of an upcoming clerk 3 position with a resident service coordinator position. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, on to informational. GBHA bills. Stephanie, floor is yours.
All right. Those should have been in the packet that you received. There's one for July and August. Are there any questions?
Anything stand out that we should be aware of? I didn't see any, but I'm asking.
Not that I know. I know that we had, in July, we paid out our final bill to, was it Mailbox? Is that right? Okay. I didn't know if I was saying it right. We paid out our final, invoice to them for the construction work that they had done. But that's really the only thing that I can remember going through.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions about the bill packet? All right. Then we'll move on to the financial report.
All right. That was also in your packet. We have started a new fiscal year, so yay, new budget. So things are running through. We did get our year-end submitted to HUD by the deadline of the end of August. So financially, we're okay. We're just looking at our options for. You always need more money. So if anybody's got some extra laying around, let me know.
Always go fund me. All right.
We need that extra money for our conversion at Mason Manor, so.
Yeah.
All good.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions for Stephanie on any of the financial report?
I have one question. Could you get the numbers any smaller, Stephanie? In the print?
I can, but Cheryl yells at me.
They're like teeny tiny. No, that's it.
Have you considered red, yellow, and green color coding?
Smiley faces and frowny faces.
I know it. That's actually what I was thinking of when I was complimenting them on it. Smiley faces, keep it simple.
There better not be any red on that sheet.
Yeah.
No, we try to keep out of the red, so, yeah.
All right. So anything further of substance for the financial report? No, hearing nothing. All right. Any questions on the Langen report?
No.
All right. All right, then on to the director's report. Cheryl.
All right, well, we are happy to say that at the October RDA meeting, we'll be providing the housing study. That's finally completed. We've got it into the shop now for the last typo corrections and all that fun stuff. So we will get this board a copy of that as well. You know, that's a comprehensive view of kind of what we need in Green Bay. And I think I can tell you just from the preliminary stuff I'm reading, you know, everyone knows we need that affordable, lower income housing, but we also need the really, really high income housing,
Really?
which you think, what? But what's happening is people in Green Bay aren't, like if I can afford $2,500 a month rent for a unit, but I can't find that unit, then I'm renting at 1,500, and it works its way down that system, all the way down.
Right.
So you need to have those upper units too for people that have a lot of money. So,
And I know anecdotally, a lot of my contemporaries who have retired recently have sold their houses or are contemplating that, looking for apartments, condos, and those kinds of things in the downtown area, or even in the surrounding area to move to. They're, tired of cutting grass and shoveling snow and all sorts of things. So, and it's the area. They love the area. They don't want to move to Florida or, and be hit by hurricanes and go to California and Arizona get burned up in fires. And so
right.
here they're looking for a higher income or higher level places to move to. So that seems to be consistent with what that report says.
Your life experience, yes. So we'll get you a copy of that when that's released. Also, I was in a meeting with the Greater Green Bay Community Foundation, who's working on a homelessness initiative. They've got a planner hired. I think Rashad Cobb is going to be that point person to start coordinating those efforts in Green Bay. I think it's going to be a lengthy process, but a very comprehensive one. 9 months, I think, to a year until we get that plan. But I think it'll be a good one when it's completed. So that'll be good because our numbers are going up in Green Bay. Unfortunately, you're starting to see more homelessness now. And part of that's with evictions coming up. Of course, COVID doesn't help any of that at all. And I'm sure Terry can speak to all of the issues that she's having with people who lost their jobs and whatnot. So hopefully we'll get some ideas going forward with that. And we are moving forward with hiring our department's director job. So we'll be starting interviews on that. I think at the end of September, we have a number of candidates that are good. So we're moving forward with that. Not that I don't love the interim director job and the assistant director job together. But so we are moving forward on that. So that's my report. Jamie, Stephanie, do you have anything else to add? I think we've been okay with COVID at Mason Manor. Knock on wood.
No known cases since initially it came out.
So that's been good.
Good. Wow. Yeah, that's always a scary situation there, because it could get out of hand before you even know it's a problem.
Yep.
All right. Anything further for Cheryl or staff from the director's report perspective? All right, hearing none, then we'll move on to the occupancy report for September.
Okay, that's in your packet as well. So we do have a few individuals that are moving out. We can start processing evictions this month. The CDC updated an eviction moratorium. It's not the HUD mandated moratorium, so it's not as cut and dry as HUD's. It's a little more generous if all 6 bullet points are hit for every single person. So we can start pursuing a few evictions for non-payment of rent under certain situations. And we just have general move-outs as well, a few elderly tenants that are just needing additional services that are just moving in either with family or nursing homes. So.
Okay. In terms of the evictions, are we doing anything to make sure? I guess I don't want this to become a PR issue where we get slammed as a housing authority for evicting people. I want to make sure that we bend over backwards to the extent that we legally can to help these people out.
The situations that I'm dealing with, Bill, are we have tenants that are on fixed income that have not been affected by COVID financially that are not paying rent.
Right. So that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. So it's not like say hypothetically, our single families are our scatter sites that are more up and down income.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm processing interims every month for these families. Like, they're constantly giving me 3 consecutive checks so I can adjust rent. Like, I am doing a ridiculous amount of interims because I want their rent to affect what their actual income is.
Sure.
And we are doing very due diligence of what your actual versus projected income is. but the evictions that we are processing right now are fixed income tenants that have not seen a decrease in income for non-payment of rent.
Good. Well, God bless you for that.
I can tell you that I've gotten a couple of requests for appeal that, that during COVID, we let them stay because we didn't want to displace the families, right, when they had no place to go, those types of situations. So we really took that into consideration when the stuff was happening.
Good.
That and seeing Jamie's eyes just turn a little bit black when you even asked, I think that sounds fantastic. You guys are doing great.
Very good. Okay, so any further questions on the occupancy report? Okay. All right, so moving on to item number 6. Next meeting date is October 15th, which should be a Thursday, I think. Let me check my
Yes.
calendar.
Bill, you will not be at that meeting, or you will?
No, I will be. If we're doing it by Zoom, I can be there. I'll connect that way. I may have a bunch of little kids running around in the background, but,
And then we probably, if we're going to meet on the 5th, yeah, 'cause it's early, the 1st is on a Thursday. That's why it's kind of early for us in October.
yeah,
I think once we get those numbers, we'll try to call that meeting. So if they can get us those numbers back quickly, if we can get it the last week of September, maybe even, we'll just call a quick meeting to kind of handle those issues, see how we want to go forward.
okay. All right. Well, anything else for the good of the order here before we call for adjournment? Nothing? All right. Then is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you, Terry, and I will second. We have a motion to adjourn. Thank you all very much for your time this morning, and all in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Stay safe. Be well.
Have a great day.
Bye.